Hi, I'm Stephen Feinberg, Executive Director of the Rhode Island Film and Television Office. Our guest tonight is Alexia Kosmidor. She's a senior lecturer at RISD, a filmmaker, and she's the Executive Director of Shifting Vision Films. Welcome to Double Feature.
Thank you, Steve.
So, you are from Ohio, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
And I believe you went to Miami, and then somehow you made your way to Rhode Island, and you studied at Brown. So that's how you came to Rhode Island. How did you get into films? Because you're an award-winning filmmaker. Mm-hmm. What made you get into films and discuss that?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a filmmaker because I liked the early anthropological films, and I thought of doing that. So to me, doing field work as an anthropologist and film are very similar in their sort of vision about storytelling and so forth. So I didn't really follow that route. Somehow I got waylaid in English literature and really involved in Native studies for a little while in terms of that. So then I made my way back into doing a film. Actually, my first very small film was on the Narragansetts. So
Narragansett Indians.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So in a weird way, it's about discovery.
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
I know that your films you're a risk taker, you think outside the box, and you explore areas that I think many of us haven't explored, or
Mm-hmm.
the audience
Mm-hmm.
hasn't explored.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really cool. And it is educational.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What was the experience like doing the Narragansett documentary?
Well, it was interesting because it was the time of the smoke shop incident, so we were going in a different
raid.
direction.
There was a big raid for our
Absolutely.
audiences. Right.
So we were interested in at least trying to capture Native perspective on all of that. So we got very involved in that, and we're interested in really showing Rhode Islanders that connection that the Narragansett have had to their land, what that meant perhaps about the police entering the reservation and so forth. So we were hoping that we were able to sort of bring a larger perspective to a larger audience about that experience.
Right. And where did that premiere, that film?
At RISD, actually,
Yeah.
in terms of that, and it was open
This
to
is
the
in
public.
like 2004,
yes, that was our
2005.
first. It was, really our first film. We were all university students or professors, so it wasn't a big end documentary, but we were, intent on showing that perspective during that time period because it was a very tumultuous time with the state and so forth.
I remember, very
Mm-hmm.
divisive.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you gleaned from that experience of making that documentary, or any lessons learned for yourself as a filmmaker?
I think there's always lessons in terms of that. I think we learned to listen to the Native perspective. Sacham Thomas was very much involved in the film. Lots of the elders that are really important voices in the Narragansett. So I think really I felt like we were only a vehicle for allowing them to tell their story, and that's really what we were trying to do, to give them that sort of venue.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
What now? So you went from there, and then you segued to, is it Not on My Campus? Is that the next film you did?
I think our next film was about the roller derbies.
Oh, what's it called? Roller Derby? What was it?
Yeah,
What's it
Not
called?
Your Mama's Roller Derby.
Not Your Mama's Roller Derby.
That was a fun film. We followed the roller derby teams in Rhode Island for a long time, for
Right.
a year or so, and they were just really a lot of fun. We never really knew their names. They had names like Burnin' Helen and
Bombshell.
Yeah, they were just great.
Right.
Fearless women.
Right.
That was a lot of fun doing. And actually it premiered at the Film Fest here, and some of the roller derby girls came on in roller skates, so that was really fun. It was a lot of fun.
What now when you make a documentary or any film, you're almost getting married to the subject, right?
Yeah,
You're investing quite a bit of time. What made you want to do a film on the roller derby girls?
I think because no one really at that point had such funny notions about roller derby from the 60s and 70s.
Right.
So it had really changed, and then it was so empowering for the women. You know, some of these skaters were librarians, English teachers, but they would get a pair of skates on and they became these other entities, you know,
Right.
fearless.
Right,
So
like
we
Wonder
really
Woman.
got,
They became
yeah,
Wonder Woman.
they had I remember an album, every time someone got injured, they would take a photograph. And so they'd collect these injuries, you know, and they were
Right.
very proud of that. So I really liked their spirit. They were amazing and fun to film, really.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So was the next film you did was the with the vagina monologues controversy? And that's where it was the Providence College campus wouldn't
Right.
allow
Yeah.
the showing of the play The Vagina Monologues.
Right.
And you did a documentary on that.
Right. We followed the students that were fighting. I think he's still President Shannon. Shanley, I think.
Shanley.
Yes.
I think
think
he
he's
might
still
be
there.
retired. Yeah, I think
They're
he might
close.
be in his last year.
Could be in terms of that. So we were really looking at the students who were really against this. They actually did their own production off campus, and they were really sort of working to sort of persuade the college to do something with that. But
How now did you decide to do the documentary after reading the headlines in the paper, or how did that all come about?
yeah, we saw that in the newspaper, and we found the two women that were the spokespeople, and we talked to them, and they were so articulate and so genuine about their commitment that we thought that would be a good story. So we followed them around. You know, we weren't really allowed on campus, but we'd come in with a camera and sort of, you know, see what they were doing almost every day.
Now, how many, like, can you talk about your crew? Like, how many people are working with you? You say we.
Yeah.
So what are we talking
maybe
about?
4 people.
4 people.
In terms of that, a couple camera people. They were at the time URI students.
Yep.
So we were pretty informal in terms of that. Sometimes we borrowed the cameras from URI, then eventually we bought our own cameras in terms of that. But yeah.
And are these your partners in your company, or is it you know, just do you hire them, or how does that work? Volunteers?
Yeah, they were volunteers, interns. A couple of them, when we did TransJourney, one of them was a URI intern that was our audio. And we hired a DP when we were in Seattle, so we worked that way.
Yeah.
The other, for that particular film, was Blue Wade was the other director. She had graduated with an MFA from RISD, so she was trained in film too. So we sort of, you know, just did it that way. A very small crew with a lot of, you know, skills.
Right. So when you're doing a film like Not on My Campus, as an example, you don't you know that there's conflict. Obviously, there's conflict, and that always makes great drama and great documentaries. But do you find that as you're going in, you're diving into these people, and that there's so much discovery and surprises and
Yes, I think that always happens. You have to be persistent. I think I called President Shanley maybe for 2 months before we finally got an interview with him. So I think you have to be persistent. And I think finally I said, well, we're just going to have to make up your position on the vagina monologues. And then his secretary called us back and said, yes, indeed, President Shanley will talk to you. And that was a wonderful interview for us in terms of that. So it was mostly just persisting, because you do want to represent in a documentary the other position.
Right.
Sometimes they're not willing to
balance.
talk to you.
You'd like to be balanced.
Yes, and yeah.
If you can, you try
yes,
to.
yes.
How much footage did you shoot for that? Or do you remember how many hours you had of footage to then whittle it down?
Yeah, I think on our last film we got better at that shooting, especially with a professional DP. We really shot very small, so we had less footage to go through. But yes, I think because we were beginning filmmakers, we overshot, but that's a tendency. So
Right.
in our final film, TransJourney, we shot it very selectively.
Right.
Even though the DP would say, you want another shot of the feet? And it's like, no, we have 5
right. But what about like when I did a film, and I knew what the topic was, but I did not know where the drama. I was worried, to be very frank. I was worried, where's the drama coming from? And then in an interview, my God, the whole spine of the documentary came about. Did you know, like, how, like, structure?
I think that's intuitive, don't you? I do remember in TransJourney, which was about two trans women and their stories and their mother in terms of that. The older trans person that we shot, who's now passed away, Shannon, she had a story, and she liked to go fly fishing, so we followed her out. This was shot in Seattle, into the stream for hours, and I finally asked her some stories about her spirituality, and it came out. But I remember my feet were absolutely cold because I had been standing in a a cold stream for hours, and that's when finally that story came out. So yeah, sometimes it's sort of in odd moments, in terms of that. But that part was a really wonderful part that we really needed as filmmakers.
I think that's very interesting because, again, I found that when my back was against the wall and I just kind of cast out desperately. Yeah. And maybe that's what you were doing. You were in the water, freezing, and you're like, this is not, I'm desperate for something.
Yeah. And well, I remember she's saying every year she went fly fishing with her son, but when she came out to her son, she says, he never went fishing with me again. So it was
painful.
That was the moment, which you hope you get.
The lightning in the bottle, the emotional moment.
That was a very powerful moment.
What about Rhode Island, Here That Divides Us? Is that Here That Unites Us? Is that the name of the project that you did? Can you talk about that a bit?
I think that was the shorter clip we did on the vagina monologues.
Okay.
That we cut it down for a short film that was, I think, on PBS.
Yeah.
In terms of that, it was.
And then there was
Sappho's Fire.
Sappho's Fire. So Sappho's Fire, you also received some kind of Fulbright award or Fulbright scholarship of some kind?
To screen it in Poland. It was about older lesbians. And
10, right? 10 older lesbians from New England?
Yeah, I had had a Fulbright there and taught there for a year, and it's a very anti-LGBT environment. So
in Poland?
In Poland,
Is this Warsaw? Is that where you
I was in Wrocław, but the film was also shown in Warsaw. So I still had colleagues there, and they said, Russia's the worst for LGBT, but Poland were right behind there. And I said, I want to come and show this film. I think this would be a really powerful moment to sort of open up a dialogue. So I was awarded a Fulbright, and we screened it in 7 places in Poland and had discussions at universities and all of that. It was wonderful. I met so many LGBT people that started the Pride in Warsaw, and they were, some of the people were really struggling because it's still not very copacetic with LGBT issues.
And I imagine it's like that in some of the Middle Eastern countries as well.
Absolutely. So,
can you how did that project come about? How did that all get started?
Because I still had colleagues, and when you go there to teach for a year, you're there as a professor. So I had developed colleagues in Wrocław, and we kept in touch, and I said, I would like to do something, about LGBT issues and maybe bring my film. So we wrote a grant together.
No, but I'm talking about the film itself. How did that film come about?
Because I met a lot of older lesbians, even older than I was at the time, maybe in their 60s and 70s, and they had such tragic stories where they hadn't come out to their family members or lost family members because of their gayness and all of that. So I felt that would be an important film to document their life experience and how it was like to be gay in the 60s or 50s. Some of the women that were older, there was one woman she and her partner were 83 when we were shooting them. So they had a very interesting life story that I felt was worth telling.
And they weren't able to express themselves,
Many
who
of
they
them,
loved, right?
Yeah, one of the women we shot lost her children because her husband had found out she was a lesbian and threatened to take her children away, and that's before, you know, certainly a family member would have that right. So they were older, but we told that story, and it was so powerful that the children were crying. I mean, they were in their 40s.
I can imagine.
It was a very traumatic experience. So we wanted to fill in that kind of history that I think younger people don't know about LGBT people, excuse me.
Right.
Yeah.
And the women that you selected, you selected 10, I think, right? Did you look to cast others and then you whittled it down to 10?
Yeah,
Or?
I mean, the film became so long. We had lots of people that we shot and didn't include in the film, but we were trying to be representative of older lesbians, a couple Latino lesbians, African American lesbians that were willing to participate in the film. So we wanted kind of a range of experiences. And
how long did you spend doing that film?
almost 2 years. It
2
usually
years.
takes a
Yeah,
long time.
it's a lot.
You know, my students at RISD, it's like, you work so long on a project. It's like, that's very
You
common.
marry it. I
Yeah,
tell people, when you marry it, you
yeah,
marry it.
absolutely.
And sometimes it feels like an
For
albatross.
yes, indeed.
Right.
That's what they're like. That long to do a film? It's like,
And you're usually not getting paid.
yes,
It's
indeed.
usually just a passion
You're
project.
tromping around, trying to find people, or
Did you fund that yourself, or how did you?
through people. We went through through programs up in Boston. We met people.
Did you get any grants?
Small grants, yeah.
Yep,
We
yep.
sort of, you know, and then we did fundraisers and things like that. You know, you just sort of make your money as you go along.
So then you'd then gone to Poland and done a little bit of teaching there, developed those relationships, and then you understood what was going on, and then you brought the film out to them.
Right. Yeah, I found people to screen it in 7 different cities in Poland.
Interesting. Did you have any of the same experiences like that had happened with the Vagina Monologues at PC? Did that end up going full circle for you, where you're now trying to show a film on a campus?
Yeah, I mean, one professor in sociology at the Wrocław University, I was very nervous to show her film there, but she was asked after we screened it with her class. They were a class on aging and care and so forth. She asked if she could keep the film to use because she thought it was very thoughtful that obviously in Poland they had aging lesbians as well. So she kept the film and used it every year in her class. So I found that really wonderful.
That's excellent.
You know, so.
That must have been very, you must have felt very proud.
Yeah, I met so many people that were afraid to go to the screening because it was an, you know, kind of controversy, but they would have someone come to the screening and say, can we have a copy of the film? So the film sort of traveled in this other way.
Like an underground.
Yeah.
It became an underground film.
Yes, indeed. It was very gratifying to know that you were touching people, and young people thanked me for coming there, and it was amazing. I felt like I had another family in Poland. It was almost overwhelming, really, as a filmmaker. That's what you hope your films are able to touch people. In this case, it was so clearly needed, and because I was an American and I could be out and visible, and we had wonderful discussions after the films. They really lent themselves to a kind of openness that I think even now Poland's fighting with the new Law and Justice, which is coming down on LGBT issues. So it was very needed. It's still needed, I think.
And what year was this?
This was about 5 years ago.
Okay.
4 or 5 years ago.
I think it was Mark Twain who said there's 2 dates you should remember: the day you were born and then the day you find out why.
Yes.
So you found out your why based on the films you're doing. What about now? Was TransJourney your next film? Can you tell us how that all started?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I went with my partner at the time, who's passed, her cousin.
Her name's Debbie?
Debbie Minuto, but I went to hear Kate Bornstein speak at the Queer Ivy League Forum at Brown years ago, and I went up to the stage with Sandy, whose daughter had just transitioned Annabelle, and she was so proud of her daughter and went up to Kate and said, "My daughter is trans, I'm so happy." And I thought, oh my God, this is such an amazing moment that Sandy's so proud of her daughter. And I think I want to make a film that's kind of captures that, that's not about the transition or affirmation surgery, but is about family and the support. So that was kind of the beginning of the film.
And what happened? Tell us about it. Tell us about the movie.
So we raised money for it, and unfortunately my partner died at the time, so we stopped the film for a year. She was the camera one and the editor, and then I started thinking about the film, and Blue Wade, who was she had finished her MFA at Rhode. She was a good friend of mine. She says, "Well, I will help you direct this." So we went back and did fundraising, raised more money for the film, and we traveled with Sandy out to Seattle to meet her daughter, to be with her daughter, and her daughter's best friend, who was an older trans person who was sort of mentoring Annabelle at the time. So the film's about Sandy, the mother, her daughter, and her older friend who's trans, Shannon, who unfortunately passed just after the film was finished.
Oh.
Had medical issues
Right.
in terms of that. So the film, was really kind of well received because it was really about their relationship, about family, and did fairly well in the film fest, won an award in, I think, one of the film fests in California, Audience Award.
So when you look back on your films that you're doing, do you notice a theme that's important to you? That do you say, "Boy, do these films? What do they have in common?"
People that don't have voices. I think that's really, we've always taken on films that perhaps at that point, TransJourney, not too many films, although there's a film fest in Seattle that's a transgender film fest that's wonderful that film was in, but wanting to tell the stories that really aren't told, and trying to be sensitive to the people in it and their stories, trying to learn from that perspective. So yeah, I think that's kind of maybe what
you're giving. You're giving a voice to those who sometimes have no voice at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That was the challenge. I think for some reason that was the challenge, to find those stories that hadn't been told.
It's so important. I love film because every filmmaker has a different perspective, and it's like, it's so exciting. Everyone has different stories or themes that they want to share, and it's like your stories are different than this person's or this person's or mine, and it's wonderful. What are you going to do next? What's next on your agenda? Because you're a risk taker, you're a filmmaker, you have a voice. What's next?
I'm trying to get a couple scripts maybe produced. I'm talking to some people. One is called Small Steps in Black Birkenstocks, which is about an older lesbian dating a trans person, and it's a comedy.
Okay. Is this a narrative or it's a documentary?
It's a feature.
Feature narrative, so like a feature film. Okay.
Yes. Yep. So we wanted to use comedy through this, and I think at Sundance we were talking about my students. I teach queer cinema at Rhode, and one of my students said, "Where are the funny films about trans people?" It's like, well, there's not that many really, so we were trying to, take a different perspective.
Sometimes that the humor actually can bring in even a larger audience.
Yeah,
and
we're hoping.
Huh?
I'm hoping, yes.
You're going to pull it off.
Yeah.
What else? You said you've got another one as well that you're working on?
A script, it's called, we're still working on it. We might submit it to CineQuest, but the deadline's very close, so I'm not sure. But it's called Milkweed Manor, and it's a comedy in a nursing home.
Oh, okay.
A Vietnam vet in a wheelchair and an older woman. So it's kind of, an interesting, trying to find humor in that space as well. Yeah. Trying to align aging and humor.
Oh, good.
So
do you want to? do the Hollywood route, or do you love the independent route and the more of the guerrilla filmmaking? Or the independent filmmaking? What's your
These are being read by some sort of indie film people that are fairly successful. Small Steps is being read by a couple people that have done fairly successful Sundance films in terms of that. So I'm not sure I want to get involved in producing, because I'm not good at raising money and so forth. So I'm more interested in the scripts. So that's where I think these films would be located, with indie film people.
And you want to direct them? Or
I don't think so.
Really?
Yeah, I think just let them go.
Why?
Because I think it's a lot of work and responsibility. And I just paid off TransJourney. That was an expensive film for us. You know, a budget maybe only of $100,000, but that's a big commitment.
Right.
So I think I can stay in films this way, perhaps.
Right.
You know, by writing them. But
sharing your story. You're still sharing your stories.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being a leader and sharing and risk taker and sharing your voice and stories, as you said, for those who often cannot speak for themselves or have been afraid for so many years, and to shine on a whole populace that perhaps has been underserved in film. And I want to thank you very much for spending the time here at Double Feature.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yep.